presentation, I will talk about the relationship between populist leaders and public administration. And a brief introduction about myself. I'm representing here the European Center for Populism Studies. It's a Belgium-based think tank that's focusing on populism. Initially, it started in focusing populism in European Union countries, then it expanded its scope to the entire world. And I'm also an associate professor of public administration at Sam Houston State University. So liberal democracy is in decline across the world, even in countries like the United States and some European Union countries. And a lot of people pay attention to why people elect populist leaders, why populist leaders become so famous and so on. But not a lot of attention is paid to the relationship between the populists and the bureaucracy when they come to power, because bureaucracy represents the establishment, and in general, the populists are against the establishments. So what happens when they come to power? How do they deal with the bureaucracy? And this is basically the topic of my presentation. I'll try to answer 3 questions. One, what do populists do with the bureaucracy when they come to power, and how does the bureaucracy react to it? And 2, should elected leaders not have control over the bureaucracy? And 3, does too much bureaucratic autonomy cause a rogue bureaucracy? In other words, the deep state. That's I know, a loaded term, but I want to touch that term in this presentation. I want to emphasize one thing. I'll give lots of examples from the United States. It's because whatever happens in here makes a lot of impact in the rest of the world. And if you go back to this picture, you see Donald Trump's picture in the back of some person's T-shirt. Do you know where this picture was taken? It's not in the United States, it's in Italy. And it's from a rally by a political party called Liga. I think people who are familiar with Italian politics know this name. So I'll give examples from United States quite a lot, from Donald Trump's presidency, and I'll also give some examples from Turkey and other countries as well. So how do populists deal with the bureaucracy? They do 3 things in general. I'm generalizing here. They do sideline or ignore. They dismantle or try to dismantle the bureaucracy, or they try to capture and use it. They actually use a combination of these 3 tactics. It depends on what part of the bureaucracy they are dealing with. And let me give you examples of each of these. And before moving into the examples, let me explain how they do this. They do 3 things. First, they change the structure of the bureaucracy. They'll change the budgeting part of the bureaucracy. They take money from the organizations they don't like, and they give money to the agencies they like more. They cut the personnel from agencies they don't like, and they give more personnel to the agencies they like. And they change the culture. They change organizational norms. They change values, and they try to criticize. They try to silence the criticism coming from the bureaucracy, especially political expertise. And they also try to overcome the accountability mechanisms by relying heavily on executive decrees. So first thing is dismantling bureaucracy. Some examples from Trump's presidency. When Trump came to power, his chief strategist, his name was Steve Bannon, and his first promise was to dismantle the administrative state in the United States. That's the federal bureaucracy. Of course, Steve Bannon did not stay in Trump's team for long. He had to leave, but his impact continued in his presidency. The last thing Donald Trump did was introduce a policy called Schedule F, and that basically turned all the career politicians at the top level into career bureaucrats into political appointees, which is basically turning people into puppets of the president. The column on the right is from an example from Turkey. After 2016, a failed coup attempt, the president of Turkey, he fired thousands of people from the bureaucracy. And most of the people that were fired from the bureaucracy were not even related to the military at all, because this was a military coup, but the people fired were first judges and prosecutors, college professors, teachers, and people in other parts of the bureaucracy, and they were mostly at the top level. So purging the top level of the bureaucracy basically made the bureaucracy basically a lapdog for Erdogan administration. This next thing is sidelining the bureaucracy. This is a embarrassing episode from Donald Trump's presidency. There was a hurricane approaching the U.S. mainland in 2019. It was called Hurricane Dorian. And the National Weather Service, they made a prediction here, and it shows that the hurricane is going to hit Florida.
And for some reason, I don't know why, Donald Trump, he took a Sharpie and he added a piece to the cone, and he included Alabama into the cone. For no reason, I don't know why. Nobody knows why. And he said that the hurricane is going to impact Alabama. And people living in Alabama, they got freaked out. They started calling the National Weather Service saying that, are we going to be impacted by the hurricane? And people working in the National Weather Service said, no, no such a thing is going to happen. And they made a public statement, and Donald Trump got angry at this. So he called agency heads, he threatened them, and eventually the NOAA, they made a public statement, unsigned public statement, saying that, well, the hurricane might hit Alabama as well. This is an example from Trump's administration. He used Homeland Security agents for cracking down on protests in democratic cities, especially in the West Coast, but also in cities like Chicago as well. In the next slide, I'll show you some examples from Turkey. So on the left, you will see one lady. She was one of the leading figures in the opposition party in Turkey, and she was banned from politics just because of one tweet. And another one is an op-ed from the Reuters, basically saying that Erdogan is using the courts as a tool to suppress any kind of opposition. So how do bureaucrats react to this situation? Well, they do three things. They work with the populist leaders. Of course, bureaucracy is not a monolithic structure. It has many, many components. Some parts of the bureaucracy like to work with the populist leaders. Some others try to shirk, and some others try to sabotage. So examples of bureaucrats or bureaucratic agencies working with the populist leaders include Border Patrol and some of the federal agents, especially in the Department of Homeland Security, when Donald Trump ordered them to crack down on the opposition. Shirking includes things such as, especially in environmental policy agencies, whenever Donald Trump administration says deregulate this, deregulate that, they take things a little lightly and they do things that are not legally acceptable and always returned by the courts. They don't file certain documents on time, keep delaying, delaying, and delaying. This happened quite frequently. And finally, sabotaging. And this is a very famous example from Donald Trump's presidency. A guy named Miles Taylor, and he was not a career bureaucrat, he was a political appointee. He was inside Donald Trump's team. He was the chief of staff of the Department of Homeland Security, and in 2018, he wrote an op-ed to the New York Times saying that I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration. So even in Trump's team, people in Trump's team, people knew that what he was doing was bad. So they tried to contain the damage that he was causing inside American governmental system. So the next question is, and this is a legitimate question, should elected leaders not have control over the bureaucracy? Yes, but. So there is no single solution on the question of how much political autonomy, how much political control over the bureaucracy and how much bureaucratic autonomy we have to give. But the answer to this question depends on one country to another one. But the general rule of thumb is that whenever an agency has a greater capacity, you can give them greater autonomy. Organizations like NASA, the CDC, these are the organizations that hire lots of scientists. And these people know what they do. They are very technical organizations, so it's better to give them more autonomy. If you're dealing with organizations that do not require a lot of skilled people, not a lot of capacity, then you can have more control over them. And the third question is, does too much bureaucratic autonomy lead to an unaccountable rogue bureaucracy, in other words, the deep state? And the answer is yes, but. What about? Because there's lots of things going on here. So the term deep state was widely used by the Trump administration, and it's widely used by populists in other parts of the world as well. But it's a very loaded term, and it's blended with lots of conspiracy theories. If you look at this picture, it summarizes the entire Trump administration here. You see, Donald Trump is trying to drain the swamp in Washington. He's fighting the deep state. But there's lots of conspiracy theories that bundled together, turned into a soup. As you can see, there's reference to Soros. There's reference to Google, Hillary Clinton. UN is here, we're right here. So they did not forget us. And he's trying to drain the swamp, basically, and we're fighting against him. So the idea of deep state is that everybody's bad except for the populist leader. In a normal day, you would look at this cartoon and laugh at it, but in reality it has some serious ramifications, because even though those conspiracy theories sound very crazy and you would think nobody would really believe them, they have some real impacts in other parts of the world. These two examples are from Germany. I think it was last year, a group of people were arrested under the charges of trying to overthrow the German government. And they were heavily impacted by some of the conspiracy theories pushed by the Trump's supporters. So the answer to this question is, what are we going to do with too much bureaucratic autonomy, or would too much bureaucratic autonomy turn bureaucracy into a rogue bureaucracy? The answer is yes, it can turn. But the solution is not conspiracy theories or not dismantling the bureaucracy. The solution is more transparency, more accountability, and more rule of law. To wrap up, I asked 3 questions in this presentation. The first one is, what do populists do when they come to power with regard to their relationship to the bureaucracy? They do 3 things. They ignore, they work with or use the bureaucracy, and they try to dismantle it. And in reaction, bureaucrats work with the populist leaders, and they shirk and they try to sabotage. And the next question is, should an elected leader not have control over the bureaucracy? The answer is yes. But the level of control depends on the capacity of the organization. And finally, does too much bureaucratic autonomy lead to an unaccountable rogue bureaucracy? Yes, it can. And the solution is more transparency, accountability, and the rule of law. Thank you very much.